Hello my friends and welcome. Let's get away from the Syrian events in this particular video. So I'm gonna make it shorter, and probably the next video I'm gonna dedicate especially for the Syrian topic, because we have lots of the things to talk about even after the Assad regime collapse. And here let's go with a military map review. Here we have the new update from the deep state military map source, and the situation in Shevchenko, this settlement, is deteriorating. It is the only settlement on the way for the Russian army to reach Kursk. So let's zoom into the place. It was yesterday and it is today, 9th of December. From what I understood, judging on the information which leaked to the media, that the local Ukrainian battalion which was defending Shevchenko actually left this area. I'm not sure whether they left Shevchenko entirely, but they start to retreat. Why did it happen? Well, it's hard to say whether it was the order from the higher military command or they were forced to leave their positions. Well, in any case, we see how Russia wants to take Kursk. They want to advance from the southwestern part, and also I guess that they will go from this area as well. This update is actually crucial. They are expanding this bridgehead, and that's why I want to put your attention especially in this area. Miraculously, Ukrainian army is still in this pocket. I don't know why there is no order for Ukrainian troops to leave this place. There was just a light update, but also not in favor of Ukraine. The Davydov village was partially occupied by Russian forces, so they're closing actually this gap. I just hope that Ukrainian forces will not be encircled in those three villages. How many of the Ukrainian troops are there? Well, could be up to 100. And in general, if we look at this perspective, there is definitely the advancement of the Russian side. So they continue to use their resources to get more and more ground, even though in parallel we hear more and more talks about some sort of the peace deal with Russia. This image was shared by one of the Ukrainian commanders. I follow him on Telegram, and he shows that Russians occupied Novotroitsk and they've almost took Shevchenko. So he writes those kind of the new borders. He says that this is the real actual information. So Shevchenko will fall, I guess, in the coming days or hours. Also, he points out the Russian south from this direction. The deep state military map source publishes this video from the drone saying that Russians tried to attack Ukrainian positions in the Kursk region using this convoy, but their convoy was spotted at the proper time and Ukraine used the FPV drones to kick them out. As usual, the FPV drones showed the great effectiveness against the Russian vehicles. You may see that there is the winter already, it's kind of cold, snowy, because it's not muddy any longer, the layer of the ground is frozen, and they may even use the field roads in this case. But obviously their attempt to assault towards the Ukrainian side failed completely today, and they have more fails than successes, but nevertheless Russia may send more and more meat waves. In general, about the Kursk region, guys, I'm very surprised that Ukraine is capable to hold the ground for such a long time there. One more Russian assault attempt in the Kursk direction. Here you can see some of the armored vehicles and tank in the front. First, the tank in the front was kaputted, and later on Ukraine finished the rest of the vehicles. It's separate midwave attack in other direction. So what is happening for Russia in Kursk? It's madness. But they're willing to regain the ground, and so far we haven't seen the North Korean soldiers in operation. Russia hesitates to use them on the front lines so far. Russia started to put the traffic lights on the roads at the front lines. So this light shows that everything is okay, you may proceed. If it is flashing or shows the red color, it means that the local electronic warfare detected the drone's operation. Yeah, it might look funny, but actually could be effective, because you don't need to communicate with every unit you want to proceed. You just put the traffic light which receives the automatic signal. So the unit on the road understands whether it's free to proceed or not. Could be effective. The interesting video of the operation of the Ukrainian drone boats was published today. They went to the Kerch Bay and they kaputted one of the ships. But the most interesting thing is not about the ship, but about the equipment now the Ukrainian drone boats have. I'm speaking about the air defense systems installed. So here you saw how there was some sort of the fire from the drone towards the helicopter. Yes, in most of the cases, Russians use helicopters to hit the Ukrainian drone boats, but with some machine gun, from what I understood, installed on a drone, the helicopters will be less effective. That's why a little later Russia called some of the fighter jet. I think it is Sukhoi Su-30. So they try to intercept the drone boat, but the drone boat is tiny. It's really hard to lock the target using the fighter jets, so helicopters are way more effective. But now there is the great threat for the Russian helicopters. So Russians were not able to eliminate the drone boat with a helicopter because it's dangerous. With the airplane, it's not effective. So they sent a small patrolling boat, but that patrolling boat was attacked as well by the drones. So it means that the Ukrainian drone boats are way more effective than before. And also it means that there is a good connection for the live signal to manipulate this machine gun turret which they have. Before, Ukraine tried to install some of the manpads, and I think in the future it will be like this. So there will be Stinger or Sterla systems installed on those drone boats. 100%. But machine gun is also very effective. According to information coming from the SBU's Ukrainian Internal Security Service, there were some of the casualties done for the Russian troops which were operating the boats or helicopters. They know it from the intercepted radio messages. Also, they've stated that drones hit one of the ships which was carrying some of the Russian weaponry to the bay, but on this video presented I couldn't find any sort of the clarification of that information. The video is edited, it's been cut many of the times, it's really hard to judge of what is happening there relative to the ship, but clearly we may see the air defense mounted on the drone, high caliber machine gun, something like that. My friends, if you want to support the job that I do on YouTube, you may support me also on Patreon. I'll put the link for it right in the video description below. Thank you. This picture of the FPV drone operation was shared by the Russian side. They used the fiber optic cable, a very thin one connecting the drone operator with his device. So there is the coil in this drone with that cable. The cable is very thin, but at the same time it's quite robust and able to send the signal. So it's impossible actually to intercept those kind of the drones. On this video, unfortunately, the drone was successful, but just look at the distance the drone was able to cover, really flown far away. So it's the new type of the technology which could be used on the front lines, which is actually already in use on the front lines, also by the way by Ukrainian side. But Russia introduced that technology more widely into their army. The new statistics of the death rate presented in the Russian Federation shows the record losses among the Russian men between 25 and 45 years old. Yes, it's the Russian source, and they say that it's 6 times higher than it was before the special military operation, so before 2022. But at the same article, they did not connect the death rate with the war in Ukraine. No, they just blame the Russian men themselves for being alcoholics and in general for not healthy life living, something like that. Putin already called for the special agency that will look through this problem and try to solve it. I guess the only solution for Russia is to take some of the men from the neighboring countries, from Caucasus, from Central Asia, to replace the Russian men which are just dying in the war. Well, actually that replacement is happening already. Let's go to some of the political news around Ukraine. So there was the interview of Donald Trump right after the meeting in Paris, where he said that he will support Ukraine less than Biden's administration. That's what I was telling you guys even before elections, that Trump will cancel or minimize the support of Ukraine. Let's listen to him.
Ukraine prepare for less aid from the United States after you're sworn into office?
Yeah, probably.
Will receive less support over here. You heard it. You heard it yourself.
In 24 hours. You've even said you want to try to end it before you're sworn into office. You're actively trying to?
I am.
Have you talked to President Putin?
No, I have not.
You haven't talked to President Putin
No, I have
since
not.
you've been
You
elected?
mean, well, I don't want to say that, but I haven't spoken to him recently.
Well, the rest doesn't really matter whether he speaks with Putin or not, but here Trump said that he will try to solve this big issue of war. Well, before he was sure about it, but now he will try. He will try, yes. Everyone tries now, but it doesn't matter, then Russia still wants to continue the war. Well, at the same time, Trump later said that Zelensky is ready for negotiations. Yes, but Putin is not, and Trump doesn't have the real levers to act on Putin's decision. Putin doesn't care about Trump's wishes just because Trump is Trump. No, the so-called respect doesn't work in this case. Russia hasn't used its forces in Syria because they're limited. They want to use those in Ukraine, especially for the next year, because their military budget is quite huge, right enough to continue the war in Ukraine. The Foreign Affairs tells that the only thing that may force Russia to start some sort of the negotiations with the Ukraine is the degradation of the Russian economy. But also in this article they say that the Russian economy is not yet in the catastrophic state. So after all, Russia may continue because the key players do not implement the critical sanctions on Russia. For example, the Russian oil export is not banned completely, just the limit price for the Russian oil is established, but with the help of the Russian ghost oil tanker fleet, Russia is able to sell its oil wherever it wants to sell it. The Russian oil is just being refilled from the Russian ghost tankers to the legal tankers and been sold to the United States of America even, or even to Saudi Arabia. Yes, the countries which produce their own oil, but they purchase the cheap oil from Russia and sell that oil for their own higher price. Nothing personal, just business. And remember how recently the United States of America implemented the sanctions on the Russian Gazprom bank? Well, now Europe wants to lift those sanctions because they want to trade the Russian gas with Russia. And the United States want to sell their own liquid gas to Europe, yes, for the higher price. That's why they canceled this bank for Europe, cutting it out from SWIFT. But Europe doesn't want to pay that much for all of the gas they have. They want to have some of the alternative even from Russia. So I do support the sanctions on the Russian bank because Russia is basically aggressor, it's our enemy. But the sanctions were applied on the Gazprom bank not because it's the Russian bank, but because it's more profitable for some of the side. And you know, guys, our European partners actually transferred more funds to the Russian Gazprom bank than for supporting Ukraine since the beginning of the war. Moreover, Ukraine itself continued to receive around 800 million United States dollars per year for transferring of the Russian gas. Well, in the nearby future, Ukraine will cut that transfer, which only existed because our European partners asked Ukraine to continue the transition of the Russian gas. That's why the Syrian question is also very important here, because some of the Middle East countries may start to transfer their own gas through the possible future pipeline which goes to Europe via Syria. So I'm telling you about it just for you to understand that in a nearby perspective, Russian economy will live. It's just impossible to shut it down from the external markets in a matter of couple of years. It could be a very long game as it was with the Soviet Union during 80s. And actually Donald Trump might play a great role here because his idea is to lower the oil prices by starting to pump more oil from the United States. So yes, the Russian economy is suffering, the perspectives are terrible, but the collapse of the Russian economy will not happen the next year, 100%. So Putin may afford his war in a close perspective. Well, Zelensky today said about the details of his talk with Macron and Trump during his meeting in Paris. They were definitely speaking about the ceasefire. Well, he told those leaders that Putin is not willing to stop the war and they will see it in the coming months. Also, Zelensky said that they might look for the proposal from Macron to send the international forces to protect Ukraine temporarily. Before Ukraine will be taken to NATO, he will speak also with President Biden about the possible invitation Ukraine for NATO. So the plan maybe is to get that invitation, deploy some of the international forces, I don't know, French Foreign Legion to Ukraine, ceasefire with Russia, and that's it. But you know, no one asked Russia about the scheme, so Russian idea is to continue the war, and they will look at the possible French forces, for example, as the direct intervention towards their own territories, because they put Kherson, Zaporizhia, Donetsk, Luhansk Oblast into their constitution, so they will continue the fight for that no matter what. So the only way for Ukraine is to get more protection, so the more weaponry, which the future Trump's administration doesn't want to give, as we see from his interview. It is understandable for me. I wonder why it wasn't understandable for those guys who supported Trump but at the same time wanted to support Ukraine with more weaponry. No, that scheme doesn't work. We have the new statement of Peskov, the spokesman of Kremlin. He transferred the message of Putin that Zelensky should lift the ban to negotiate with Putin directly, and also Ukraine should follow the principle of the Istanbul agreements, which didn't happen, and also include the current realities on the front lines. So basically recognizing not just the occupied Russian territories, but what they want to occupy. Well, actually the Istanbul agreements are basically the capitulation of Ukraine, that's it. According to those, the maximum capacity of the Ukrainian armed forces should be not more than 80,000 soldiers. And as Zelensky said today, Russia has roughly 800,000 forces in Ukraine, so potentially 10 times more than Ukraine should have according to the Istanbul agreements. Also, no robust security guarantees for Ukraine, nothing. Well, in that case, Russia would just directly occupy Ukraine, that's it. The same thing that they've done in Chechnya after the Hasavurt agreements. So I'm telling you again, guys, Putin is willing to continue. There is no way to negotiate with Russia without losing Ukraine, on the Russian terms, obviously. But Russia do not accept any kind of the other terms. Putin doesn't care about anyone's opinion, including Trump. His goal is Ukraine and actually beyond. He wants to restore the Soviet Empire or the Russian Empire. He said about it many times in his speeches. Why do some politicians still think that it's some sort of the local conflict between Ukraine and Russia? It is not like that. It's already a global conflict. Well, Trump also said about the Russian losses once again 700,000. He said for Ukrainian side 400,000. Well, after that Zelensky said that the Ukrainian losses are 43,000 KA and the rest are wounded, but we understand that it's not like that, so the total losses could be, yes, close to 400,000, but KA losses are usually 3-4 times less than the total losses. So if we take 400,000, which could be from Ukrainian side, also including the losses from civilians, I think that Ukraine lost not less than 120,000 KA. Those losses are tremendous judging on the population of Ukraine relative to Russia. For Russia, yes, it's critical and Putin wants to avoid mobilization because he will be not that popular as before if he announces it massively, but his goal is to occupy Ukraine and he will do this step if it will be necessary, if they will be not able to get more volunteers whom they paid millions of rubles to join the Russian army. So on one side, it's good that Trump thinks that Zelensky is ready to negotiate, so Zelensky was able to convince Donny for that, at least. But it doesn't mean that Trump's administration will 100% take Ukrainian side in negotiations. No. I think that they want to finish this war, but they don't really care about the terms of it to be over. They still see it as the local conflict and not the threat for the global democracy. There is some warning issued by the United States Embassy in Kyiv. They say that there is the increased threat from Russian missiles and drones targeting Ukraine. There is also the information that Russia might use its Oreshnik missile to hit Kyiv, because Russia has the reputational loss in Syria and they want to restore it, showing how mighty they are. Well, someone kaboomed a car in the central district of the occupied Donetsk city. Well, inside there was the director of the Yelenivka prison center, which was targeted by Russians before. Then Ukraine lost many of the prisoners of war in that Russian prison facility. Well, Russians say that it was the HIMARS attack, but later on the international investigators found out that it was the internal explosion, so the device was planted inside of one of the rooms of that prison. So probably Russia wants to get rid of the witnesses of that event, who might potentially expose the Russian war crime secrets. Right, we have the report from the United Kingdom government, from their intelligence probably, and they refer to the satellite image showing the damage to Russian air defense systems. This is S-400 system, which Ukraine hit several days ago, so we have the confirmation of it, and those are not the systems in those diamonds. Those are the emergency rescue vehicles. The systems were located in somewhere in this debris area. Alright guys, I don't want to make this video really long. The next update will be about the Syrian topic, so stay tuned. I wish you all a peaceful sky wherever you are and have a great time.